Hey Ajith, welcome to this conversation with me, and it's good to have you here. Before we talk about your fantastic career transformation from QA to DevOps or QA to cloud, can you please introduce yourself briefly to our viewers?
Sure. So first of all, thanks GK for giving this opportunity to talk to your subscribers and of course share my story. Yes, I have around 7 years of experience in IT. So mostly I worked on cloud DevOps. So I started my career with Capgemini as a fresher.
Okay.
So I've selected through on campus. So when I got into Capgemini, so there was no chance. So there was no choice of mine. So they directly put me into testing, and then I worked with Capgemini for 2 years. Then I thought, okay, let's try to switch to the domain which got good demand in the market. And then I learned AWS, and I've done few certifications like AWS Solution Architect and OCI, which is the Oracle Cloud Solution Architect.
Okay.
And then I switched to a startup company. That's where I got to learn about complete DevOps and end-to-end. After that, I switched to Oracle again. So for better exposure, because I wanted to work with a product-based company. And then I moved to Infosys. And then after working, I think closely 1.5 years with Infosys, I thought it's time to switch again. And then so I switched again. So currently I'm with the German MNC working as a cloud and DevOps engineer. That's it.
Okay, that's awesome. So you started as a QA engineer, and then when you started as a QA engineer at Capgemini, was it all manual QA or you had some automation as well there?
I could say 80% manual and 20% we used to write small shell scripts. That too, I think 5 to 6 lines. And we kept running the same shell script again and again for the reports. And I used to write test cases manually. So I was into telecom project where we calculate call charges, message charges as part of the testing. So the 2 years it just went like that. So it was not at all interesting, of course. So then I thought, okay, I should learn new technologies. My work should be a little bit challenging, because if you start working on same technology or same domain for long time, and if your work is not challenging and you get bored, right? Of course, you'll not get better hike as well, because you're not doing anything extra. You're not doing anything innovative.
Right.
So, and as you know, Indra is he's my batchmate during my engineering, and of course he was my roommate too. So
that
every
for
week
you to go to DevOps, I guess.
Yes, yeah, that he contributed a lot. So we used to have a call every week, twice in a week. And then he started, he just asked me, what are you working on? And during my first 2 years, I don't know about which skill has a good demand and which skill is challenging. So I thought, okay, whatever I'm doing currently, I thought this is okay. I was into comfortable zone. Then I told that I'm working as a manual testing engineer here. And then Indra politely said, Ajit, there are certain technologies, I think you just start working on it, then you would realize it. Then I thought, I didn't take it seriously. And then I started working. I just started working for 1 hour or 1.5 hour in a week on AWS.
So you started learning AWS slowly while you're working at Capgemini for 2 years. So when you had this conversation with Indra, he suggested to take DevOps or cloud as a career option. So you slowly started learning AWS by yourself.
Yes. So AWS provides a 1 year free tier account, right? So 1 year free. I've created my free tier account. I used to search, how to create instances and how to create VPCs, and in YouTube, Google, and then by watching that, I've started learning, but I've not put entire effort like 2 hours per day, 1 hour per day. I was only through weekends I used to work. And then I again one of my managers, he approached me and he said that I mean, he was into testing I think 15-16 years, and then he approached me and he said that, okay, since you are fresher, so it's been only 1.5 year, right? So
Yeah.
you can try for other skills like AWS or data science and DevOps, and you can switch and you will have I mean, better future. He suggested me, and then I started to take that seriously. So I invested at least 2 hours per day. I started working, 2 hours per day. Yes, learning AWS. That is, this is after 2 years, 2 years of my experience. And then I took it seriously, and every day, I mean, after my logging off for the day, I used to work 1.5 or 2 hours on AWS. I just used to follow AWS official articles, and then I used to launch EC2 instances, VPCs, firewall rules. And I used to create, small Hello World application, and I used to deploy in Tomcat. And of course, whenever I get stuck, I used to, torture Indra, saying that, how can I get rid of this error? How can I, how can I automate this? So this process went, I think, at least 2 months. Then I thought, okay, it's time to do certification, AWS certification. So then I prepared for 1 more month, and one more month, and then I've cleared my AWS Solution Architect certification. Then I thought, okay, I'm okay to face interviews. I can get it wherever I want. Then I started attending few interviews, but I failed miserably. So it's like even during first during first round only, I failed like anything. So
in the first round, question, Ajith, so basically you were doing all this stuff while you were working at Capgemini, right? You haven't resigned. Obviously,
no, I haven't resigned. Yes,
that makes sense.
Obviously. Yes, because I didn't get any confidence, right? So those interviews, I mean, in fact, I was not having any interview experience. I don't even know there are 2 rounds, 2 technical rounds and 1 managerial round. Because I started my career as a fresher, and just 2 years after I started attending, and then I failed in few interviews, 1, 2, I think 2 to 3 interviews I failed. And then I thought, okay, having technical knowledge is not enough.
Yeah, so those interviews were mostly on the DevOps, or they were also on AWS cloud. So how did you, so before we get into the interview part, right? First, I would like to ask you how much time you took to learn in total, like how much effort that you took to learn DevOps or cloud, or both, and what tools have you learned in DevOps at the time?
Yes, so I think I've spent at least 6 months to learn AWS and DevOps. So as part of AWS infrastructure concern, so I worked on, I've learned AWS CloudFormation templates and AWS EC2 services, load balancers, and of course Linux administration, because that's a basic step for DevOps. Because so that's the first technology you should excel. If you want to start your career with the DevOps. So after Linux administration, then I put my concentration on AWS. So in all, almost all the major services I've started to learn, and I've done AWS Solution Architect. And then as far as DevOps tools are concerned, so I've learned GitLab commands. Bitbucket, GitHub commands, and then of course for DevOps,
basically basic Git commands.
Yes, basic Git commands. And then as far as configuration management is concerned, I was good with Ansible playbooks. And then I also worked on Jenkins and AWS CI/CD. So, and I've also worked on Nagios for monitoring. Tool. Yes, so this is my first phase. During my first phase, I thought, okay, I should be good with one end-to-end life cycle. So I've created a pipeline where it fetches code whenever there's a change in Git repository, and then I build it. So as far as build tools are concerned, I've learned Maven and I've learned how to write pom.xml and setting.xml during that time. So the small end-to-end pipeline I worked on, like whenever there's any change in repository, the pipeline should trigger and then build and then deploy. So once it is deployed using our monitoring tools like Nagios and Prometheus, I just monitor the endpoint URL. So I worked on this entire end-to-end pipeline during that time. Then I felt confident that, okay, so at least I have knowledge on one pipeline.
Great. This is fantastic. So you have created the whole pipeline all by yourself, or have you, did you go to any course online or anywhere training outside? And how did you know that, okay, I have to build this CI/CD pipeline? I know Indra was helping you bits and pieces, but
Yes.
how did you know that there are scenarios like this that I have to deploy using Ansible, and I have to use Nagios for monitoring and all those things?
Yes, so I used to follow a few articles from DevOps Cube and Stack Overflow and
Okay.
DigitalOcean, and I was also following almost all AWS official documentation. And then to clear AWS Solution Architect certification, I've taken one course from Udemy by Ryan Kumbach.
Ryan Kumbach. Yep.
Yes, that particular course has helped me to crack that AWS certification. And of course, so to understand real-time scenarios, I used to call Indra, because he was the only friend of mine who was working in cloud DevOps already during that time. So so it's like every day I used to, I was confident on technical knowledge, but I was not confident on
the real-time scenarios. Yeah.
In real-time scenarios, how to fit my story in my experience, because I don't have that experience that time.
Correct. Yeah, that makes sense. And I think the pro tip here for people who want to learn or switch technology like you did, basically is to talk to the right person who has experience in DevOps or who is currently working, and then discuss with that person of like how the real-time things work. Right, like how you create DevOps pipeline. Okay, that makes sense. Now,
yes, one more point to add.
Sure.
So, let's say wherever project you're already working, I think that particular project already has cloud team. You can reach to the cloud team, and you can genuinely ask them, and what is your roles and responsibilities, and what is your work, what are the automations you're daily doing. So I used to ask my cloud team. So being a test engineer, whenever I get defect, so I used to go to all the teams, right? So that's where I got to learn about infrastructure. I got to know about few things and bits and pieces from the cloud team as well.
Yeah, that's a smart move, Ajith, there, because I think most of the people these days, most of the companies anyways have infrastructure team or an operations team who would be using cloud or DevOps. So the best thing is to reach out to them, even though you're not part of that team, and then ask them and look at the documents. Most of the Confluence pages will be open for everybody to access them, and to understand how things really work, so that you can fit your story into that. Okay.
Yes.
Great. And how did you convince the interviewer? I know you said like 2 or 3 interviews you have failed, right? But failure might have definitely taught you some lessons. What questions they're asking in interviews. And like, to be honest with you, even I failed initially, and it was really a good thing to fail with the smaller companies, right? You don't want to apply to Google and fail. You want to fail at a smaller companies. That way you will know what questions you want to understand. But the question that I wanted to ask you was, when you were preparing, or when you have prepared a resume, right, as a DevOps engineer or a cloud engineer, when you went to the market, how did you frame your resume from QA to DevOps? And then how did you convince your interviewer, the interviewer, that you have worked as a DevOps engineer, or you can work as a DevOps engineer?
Yes. So to grab any job, creating resume is the first step and the major step, I would believe. Correct. Because I've seen my friends and who create resume with a strong words, and even though they don't have any experience on any tools, they mention it because they wanted companies to shortlist their resume.
Correct.
But eventually, all the interviewers, right, they would ask questions only from resume, right? Correct. So if you keep even one point where you don't know any experience on it, and then you might fail. So what I believed is, whenever I create any resume, right, I used to mention all the points which I already know, which I'm already confident about. Correct. So I kept my resume simple. So as I've already explained before, so I have I got little bit confidence on creating pipelines end to end. So I just tweak that particular flow, and I've just divided this entire pipeline into 4 to 5 points. It's like, I have experience in working with Git commands, and then I've started working on Jenkins CI/CD pipelines.
Right.
So I just divided this entire pipeline into 5 to 6 points, and then I highlighted in my resume. So of course, I've highlighted Ansible and AWS side, almost all the services and the monitoring tool. So the funda is, I mean, if you divide the DevOps into few parts, the first part would be version control systems. That means you should be good either with Git commands, Bitbucket commands. Of course, all the commands are similar, but in your resume, you should start you should start mentioning points about Git first, and then here comes the configuration management, right? And under configuration management, you have Ansible, you have Puppet, Chef, right? So you need to good with any of these tools. You don't need to good with all the tools. So because if you take any company, they don't use Ansible and Puppet together, right? They might use Ansible, they might use Puppet, right? So you need to good with any of these tools. And then here comes the CI/CD pipelines. I mean, continuous integration. Maybe you can be good with the Jenkins or AWS code pipeline, and then the deployment, and then the monitoring.
So you put only sorry to interrupt you, but did you put only Ansible in that case, right? You did not put Ansible, Puppet, Chef like people usually do. That's a huge mistake.
Yeah, that's a huge mistake. And moreover, I mean, if you want to grab a job, as fast as you can, you need to excel at least one tool in all the areas. But if you start to learn, Ansible and Puppet, I feel in the initial days you're wasting your time, because instead of investing your time learning the multiple tools in the same area, you try to learn other categories. Like I said, we could have learned Docker and Kubernetes that time, right? So instead of spending time on Ansible and Puppet together, right? So that's why I planned my resume in such a way that I learn one tool in every category, but I should be confident enough.
Okay.
So I was confident with Ansible, I was confident with Maven, I was confident with Jenkins, and almost all the AWS services.
Okay.
And so monitoring side, I've learned Nagios.
Right.
So this was my basic flow I was good with during my first 6 months after 2 years.
Right.
And then I mentioned the same thing in resume.
Okay.
And of course, in first 2 or 3 interviews, I failed because after my failures, I got to understand that, if you know technical knowledge, if you have technical expertise on all these tools, that is not going to be enough. Right. You should have the real-time scenarios, because the interviewer, the first question would be about what all the technologies you worked on, and the second question would be,
or they would ask, tell me about the recent project or something that you
recent project, and what are your roles and responsibilities, right? So if you're not sure about, of course, since we are not genuinely working in DevOps during that time, so it is kind of difficult for me to explain that question regarding what are my roles and responsibilities. So I failed in the first round itself, for first 2 or 3 rounds. Then I thought, okay, so I know I'm good with technical expertise, so let's have some real-time scenarios knowledge, right? So then I started reaching out to my cloud teams in same project, and the cloud, Indra also. So Indra was explaining about his entire project. And then I've also, you could get scenarios from YouTube as well, in Google as well. So I used to search a lot in Google. So that's where I could,
okay.
Yes, I convey. After next 1 or 2 months after learning about real-time scenarios, so I've also taken one more course just to understand real-time scenarios in Edureka, I believe.
Okay.
So it was around, I think, 20 days course. So that was only to understand the real-time scenarios. It's like, even though you're good with technical expertise, and if you don't know what are the project requirements and what kind of projects you worked on, and then you would fail in interview. So then I just gathered all my bits and pieces from everywhere. Whatever I got it from cloud team, whatever I got it from Indra, whatever I got it from internet. And then I framed my story in my own words. Right. So it's like, I just imagined a story. It's like, if I was a DevOps engineer in my project, what would I do daily? Right. I just framed my story, and then I just started to explain in the interviews. And then, after 3 to 4 months, I started to clear the first round, but I failed in second round for 2 or 3 rounds.
Okay.
But after all, this is IT, right? You'll have thousands of companies, and even if you fail, you don't need to worry about anything, because eventually next day or another day, you'll definitely get a call.
The good thing is you kept trying. You did not.
Yes, I kept trying. And one more thing is, after every failure, right, you just note down what are the questions you were unable to answer, and what were the questions, and you were not confident enough.
Yeah.
And most of the interviewers, right, they would ask questions from resume, and the second thing is they would ask questions whatever you told before. Right. First, let's say they would ask you what are your roles and responsibilities, and you would start saying that I automate things. I started to create CI/CD pipelines for entire deployment process. Then he would ask what are the tools you used in deployment process. Then you would say Ansible. Then he would ask what are the modules you worked on. So it is kind of like follow-up questions, because I felt no interviewer will write down all the questions they would ready to ask. Right, so they'll ask from resume, and they will ask regarding whatever you explained before. So that's how I started analyzing how this flow is going. And then after I think 6 months, I got 2 offers, one from MNC and one from the startup company. And then I discussed the same thing with a few of my colleagues, and everyone suggested that since you are switching your domain, I think going to startup
in a startup.
It's the best idea. Because in
I would have
MNC,
said the same thing.
Yes, I remember. I think I asked the same question to you during that day as well.
Oh,
I
really?
remember,
Okay.
and you suggested startup.
Right.
Yes. So then I was really glad that I've picked startup, because when I joined the startup company, and I felt, the project was starting from the scratch. So there was no CI/CD pipelines. There was hardly a AWS account. That's it. So I had to build it from the start, right? So, and in startup, right, you get more scope to learn new technologies, and you get more time, and of course you get more exposure. I'm not talking about all MNCs, but most of the MNCs, right, your role will be limited. It's like either they would ask you to work on cloud side, or they would ask you to work on pipeline side, or they would ask you to work on only deployment side.
Right.
So, but since I'm starting to jump from QA to DevOps, I thought I should work on all the technologies together. Then only I get confident.
Right.
So in startup, luckily I got opportunity to work on cloud and CI/CD pipelines. I've built pipelines using all these technologies, and I've also got a chance. It's like I grew. I just enhanced myself from step by step. Let's say in first pipeline I've just created. I just used to build it and deploy it in Tomcat. And then I realized, okay, let's enhance my pipeline.
This is at the startup, or this is while learning?
No, this is startup.
Startup, okay.
Yes. So whatever I've learned creating pipelines before, I've just started to implement in startup. Then I realized, then my architect, he was asking us to, let's switch to Docker. And then I've explored about Docker before only when I was preparing for the interview, but I've not mentioned completely in resume, because I was not confident enough.
So just to summarize whatever you said, Ajith, on this topic of how to prepare the resume or how to convince the interviewer. So basically what you were saying was that you be genuine in whatever you're trying to put in your resume. Put exactly what you know, 100%. Don't put everything under the sun. Because even like when I interview people, the resumes that people put everything, that really pisses me off, because I know, like, they would not know all this stuff, but just to impress the interviewer, they will put everything for DevOps. And that happens most commonly in US as well. But I really like the resumes which are short and which are to the point, and that, okay, this person has worked. And then the other smart thing that you said was that when you are saying in the interview, you would tell relevantly whatever you're confident about, like for example, Ansible, and then drag the interviewer to ask more probing questions on that topic itself. So you're taking interviewer to what you know, instead of, and then making a good impression, and then slowly the interview will be fine as you get confidence also while you're answering questions. I agree with you on all that aspects. And in fact, I also do the same thing, which is an important tip. As you're currently working in DevOps, right?
Mhm.
Did the QA experience worked as a DevOps engineer?
I would say I think 5% because when I was working as a QA, I used to write small shell script, and I know Linux administration commands like I know working with the tail grep, and of course writing small shell scripts which would eventually give old directories. So this experience I got it from QA, but it slightly helped. I would say 5 to 10%, but not completely.
Okay, that's fine. Yeah. So do you enjoy this current role as a DevOps engineer? Obviously, because you have high salary here, you would love it. But do you feel like the QA was more like flexible for you? It was more easy to work, but DevOps is more challenging. Which one do you like? Did you ever felt like you were frustrated in DevOps and you wanted to go back to QA?
Sometimes, right? Yeah, sometimes I felt like I never. I mean, once I switched to DevOps, I never felt like moving back to QA because I mean the reason I chose DevOps because I love the challenges.
Yeah.
Right. So I love innovating things, and I love working on new technologies every time. I love updating myself. So right. So that's the main reason I moved from QA to DevOps. So I mean, I never thought that I should go back to QA again.
But you are frustrated at times.
Yes, I get frustration sometimes whenever whenever you are unable to complete any task in time. Definitely, I mean, as part of DevOps, right, you need to automate so many things. Correct. And you never know what kind of requirement you get. Right. So but in QA it was like I mean, we were doing what was already there before. So the work was not interesting. Yeah, it's like a government job, and it's like you're doing the same thing every day, and there are no challenges, and there's no work pressure, and you're completely in comfortable life. So I would say I mean, during your first year or 2 years, you should be in comfortable zone so that you get used to understand how the IT goes, how the process goes, and how, I mean, you'll understand how the system in IT, right? So I always think that okay, it's good that I spent my first 2 years of my career. Okay, I mean I just enjoyed my life over there because I was comfortable. There was no pressure in my work, but at the same time the salary was low, right? So now
the good that you
I'm
came
kind
out of
happy.
Comfort zone very fast, at least in 2 years. Else you would have been stuck in that same company for probably 2 more years or in the same technology. Then it would have been little difficult for you to switch to cloud or DevOps. I would say.
Yes. I would be thankful to my friend Indra and my manager who suggested me I mean bit early phase of my career that you should switch to other technologies. I mean, I'm not underestimating QA here. I mean, of course even QA will even, I mean, if you're really good with the Selenium and
automation part of QA, yes, that's important.
Automation part, yes, you might end up with having a good CTC and good work. But I mean, this is just my opinion based on my experience and based on my friends' experiences. So I've just noticed that when compared to the average QA person, and cloud and DevOps people will get more hikes and more package. So I mean, we could also say the same thing in salary analysis, right? So that's how I started to analyze and jump.
Right. So speaking of salary, right? How much if you don't want to reveal your actual figures, that is fine. But approximately how much jump did you get from your QA to DevOps?
I would say my salary was 10x in 6 years. So currently, whatever I'm drawing, it is 10x of what I was getting when I was working in Capgemini, almost 10x. So, but I mean, it's not only because I've switched to DevOps, but it's also because I switched, I think,
more
4 companies in between. Yeah. So as I've told you before, from Capgemini to startup and startup to Oracle, and then Oracle to Infosys, and then Infosys to the current company. It's like I've cleared MNC companies and startup and product based. I've jumped because I mean, no matter I mean, how good you are, it's very difficult to, get, I think 30-40% if you stay in the same company.
Correct.
Right? So the only funda is to switch company to get good hike. Right? So then I have also realized that, I mean, once you get more experience, so it is kind of bit tougher to, difficult to switch company. So I thought, okay, during my first 6-7 years, I'll switch, I think, as much as possible. And then I switched it. So I mean, at this moment, I'm kind of drawing a decent CTC. And there are certain, I mean, a few of my friends, they've suggested that if you keep switching again and again, and few companies would eventually reject you because they don't like instability. That is also correct, but that is, I think,
it is not to
partially correct.
You're right. I mean, I agree with you, because one question that one comment rather, what people told me when I shared my experience, one of the video that went viral, right? So one person put a comment saying that, you are not, they said something, you're not loyal to the company. You are not loyal to the company or technology, you're switching more often, this is bad. And the second comment was that if you switch more often, you will get rejections. But to your point, as long as you are able to prove your worth, and then there is a demand for the technology, I don't think they would look at the number of companies, to be honest with you. And I think you are the example, and there are a lot of people who are more frequently switching. And these days, I think the norm has become as such that every 2 years or 3 years max, they will work in a company and they'll switch. One, I think you have explained it, because in India, inflation rate is also higher. So if you are staying in the same company, getting a hike of 3% or 4%, basically you're not making any money. Your money is same. Your CTC is 10 lakhs or 12 lakhs. It is 12 lakhs even after 3 years.
And one more thing, your work is going to increase year and year, right? They would eventually, they'll promote you, and they would expect, double the work which you, right?
Correct. So either you switch the company itself, or if you're working in a huge company, switch the teams, so that you'll work in a different business unit altogether, learning the new stuff. But if you're stuck there without learning anything, then you'll be a liability to the company. And no matter how loyal you are to the company will not be loyal to you at that point of time.
Yes. I mean, I really don't agree. I mean, as you said, you should be loyal to company. I mean, this kind of loyalty will never get you, costly cars or costly homes, right? So unless you have good CTC.
No, I agree with you, Ajith. It's a huge topic, and people will have a lot of, their opinions on that. But, there's no right or wrong to this. It's up to individual and how they want to, do this stuff. But okay. So finally, what is your suggestion for people? And this is the most common question. And because you moved from QA to DevOps, I know a lot of people are asking me the same thing. Even I have done QA long back. I moved to DevOps, but probably because at the time DevOps was in demand. But you have done it recently, right? Like 3-4 years back. So how would you suggest for people to come out of their comfort zone, and start learning technology? Spending 6 months is not a joke that you have done. But how would you suggest them? What is your tips for them? Or what are your tips?
Yes. So I would suggest them to, go step by step. So let's say, I mean, if you are really ready to, switch to the cloud domain or DevOps domain, so you should start, you should plan it accordingly. So you should plan in such a way that in 2 weeks I should complete almost all the real-time scenarios, and you should get more expertise on that particular tool. So I'll try to explain what was my plan when I started to learn my DevOps. So when I thought that it's time to switch to DevOps, so then I started noting down all the tools required for DevOps. So then I divided one by one, and then I started to excel step by step. So first for any DevOps, so one should be very good with all the Linux commands, Linux administration commands, and the shell scripting. And then one should be very good with any of the cloud providers. You take AWS.
So when you talk about the cloud providers, right? Would you suggest them to learn now AWS, Azure, GCP, or which one would you pick or suggest them? out of top three?
Yes. So out of top three, I would suggest AWS, because the AWS client base is more, and more often AWS is, AWS has quite advanced services than Azure and GCP. So, and even in the internet, you get more documentation, more articles. There's a more support for AWS.
So how is job market, Ajith? Because now you are working. I know you have some experience in Azure as well. Comparing Azure and AWS, like how do you, which one has more demand these days?
I think AWS got more demand, because I've even in my resume I highlighted AWS and DevOps. So I used to get, when I was searching, I used to get at least one or two calls in a day. And one of my friend, he was Azure architect, and he was working with Azure DevOps. But compared to him, I think I got more calls. So it depends, but as per my opinion, I think AWS got more client base and more projects. So I think AWS will get you more calls.
Okay, Ajit, thank you. So yeah, let's continue on whatever you're saying. So first step you said about learning the tools, right? I think you said about basically learning the Linux commands and all those fundamentals. So what are the next steps that you would suggest?
Yes. So after Linux administration, you should be very good with AWS services. And after AWS, of course, you need to good with version control commands like Git commands. And after Git, then here comes the configuration management. So you should be good with either Ansible, Puppet, or Chef. So I recommend Ansible, because it is quite easy to learn in the beginning when compared to Puppet and Chef. And then, so as far as CI/CD pipelines are concerned, you can work on the Jenkins, and then AWS CI/CD pipeline, AWS code pipeline. And then as far as deployment is concerned, so initially in your pipeline, right, you can write a shell script to deploy to Tomcat, and then once you're good with the initial, this vanilla pipeline, then you have to switch to Docker. So in Docker, you need to write a shell script where you create a Docker image, and then you publish and you push it to your Docker registry, then using AWS roles, and then you need to pull it and deploy it in your cluster. Then once you're good with Docker and the Docker images, then if you have enough time, then you can work on the Kubernetes, which is kind of popular topic
these days. It's very popular
these days, right? Very popular. And then AWS also has ECS, which is Elastic Container Service.
Right.
So this is kind of hard tool.
Also, they have EKS, which is Kubernetes service. Kubernetes.
Yes, EKS. So yes, so whatever the funda is, whatever you try to learn, right? You try to create on your own, and you try to build and deploy on your own using your pipeline. Because as I've already said before, AWS provides you 1 year free tier account. You can use of all the resources. You can create a EC2, and then you can create a ECR, and then you create a pipeline, and you just write a hello world program or any small application, and then you deploy into your Tomcat. And then using Jenkins, you can also send a mail to you saying that the deployment is completed. So this is one scenario, so that you would be comfortable in your interview. And there are basic interview questions like what kind of challenges you face in interview, and then you should be ready with that particular question. And other things like they would ask you what are the roles and responsibilities, and then they would start picking questions from whatever you explained before.
How much of scripting is required in DevOps? Or these days, because I have covered this in my roadmap also, whatever exactly you have said, Python is becoming more important, right? Python programming, shell scripting, and all these things. I know shell, if you don't have Python, at least learn shell is the most common thing that people suggest. Like you are also saying the same thing. But how much of scripting that you usually use in your DevOps, day-to-day activities?
Yes, in my day-to-day automation activities, I use shell script a lot. So I would suggest for any DevOps engineer, for any AWS engineer, so shell script it's a kind of mandatory, because see, if let's say if you want to start working on any tool, the first step is to install and configure it, right? So in shell configuration, even that particular step needs your shell script knowledge, and even automating any manual task, shell script is mandatory.
Right.
Of course, I mean, the more scripts you know, the more advantages it will be for you. So I mean, if you know Python, that is very good. I mean, it's like if you know shell, Python, and then AWS and DevOps, and it is kind of it would be very easy to crack an interview.
Right.
So I would say the shell is mandatory. I mean, if you ask me to pick shell and Python, shell or Python, I would suggest shell is a necessity. So
right.
you definitely need to learn shell scripting. And then if you have enough time and if you think that I could learn Python, then you can work on Python also.
Okay. All right, Ajith, I think we have covered all the important questions that I wanted to ask you. Or do you have any final thoughts that you would like to share?
I mean, thanks a lot, JK. You know, as I've already mentioned, so during this journey, not only Indra and my other friends, I mean, you are also contributed, because when I called you and you said, you know, how to learn real-time scenarios, and since you are already working as a DevOps team lead during that time, so I mean, you helped me a lot, and I mean, as you guided Indra and Indra guided me, so indirectly you guided me too, right? So I mean, forever thankful to you and Indra and my friends who has helped me, you know, I mean, achieving whatever I'm having now.
Thank you, Ajith. Thank you for mentioning my name, but obviously what I felt is, though we have guided you, you have put 6 months of effort, which is not easy, right? Guidance you can get from anywhere when you want to really achieve something, right? You should have that first intent of, you know, getting or learning a new technology. But so your efforts, you have put in a lot of efforts, and that shows that, you know, you have switched a lot of companies and you're making good money, you're able to achieve your dreams. All right. Thank you, Ajith, for sharing all this information. It is invaluable information for a lot of people who are trying to switch to different technology or trying to switch to DevOps and cloud. So for those of you who are watching this, if you have any more questions to Ajith, please reach out to him. I'm going to share his LinkedIn URL in the description. Ask him about how he has, you know, transformed his career or anything related to his career transformation. With that, thank you so much, Ajith, for joining this conversation with me. It was awesome to have you here. And I hope whatever we have discussed, the viewers are going to enjoy this, and then they're going to learn a lot from your career transformation. Thank you.
Yes. Thanks, JK. It's my pleasure. Thanks.